Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel that takes you deep inside the San Francisco 49ers. I am your host, Jack Hammer. Welcome. It is time, 1 week from today, right now, we are going to be wrapping up week one of the 49er season out in Pittsburgh. But before we get to that point, I want to go over some topics that have been brought to my attention by the readers of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat and also people who follow me on Twitter. I put out a tweet the other day asking for some folks to go ahead and let me know the questions that they'd like answers to when it comes to the 49ers. It was a 49ers preview, season preview mailbag. And so you're looking at this title, you're saying, has Jack lost his mind? 49ers defensive end Nick Bosa is not worth being the highest paid non-quarterback? What is going on? Has Jack lost his mind? No, I haven't lost my mind. This is actually the opening topic of the show today. We're going to go through some different topics, but this is the first one. It is 49ers Nick Bosa not being worth it. And where this comes from is the question or the topic that was sent to me was quite simply this: Nick Bosa isn't worth being paid the highest non-quarterback salary in the league. Change my mind. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try to change this person's mind. It was ODog99 on Twitter. Says Nick Bosa isn't worth being paid the highest non-quarterback salary in the league. Change my mind. Now, I will look to change his mind. And if there's anybody else that's that's watching this right now that believes that, I'll work to change your mind as well. You know, you look back and right now where things are in these negotiations between the 49ers and Nick Bosa is you've seen the 49ers start to use leaks against Nick Bosa. The more information you put out as a team, it looks bad upon the player. And then you start to get the public sentiment swaying away from the player to the team. It's something that we're seeing right now with Nick Bosa. There was just the other recently on Twitter, I saw a tweet where somebody said, if Bosa holds out into the regular season while under contract and with an offer on the table, that makes him the league's highest paid edge rusher, then the heat that he gets will be justified. Sit out, can't find, missing real games, goes beyond. And that is exactly why you have people like the 49ers and you have these kind of tweets that are starting to come out right now in terms of Nick Bosa. You're seeing that from the 49ers putting some information out, putting some heat on them. And I definitely think that's part of where we are right now in this negotiation. Luke Walsh, Cedric Hardman, like button, please do. If you like what you're seeing, hit that like button. You know, and you go through and you start to look at Nick Bosa. Does he deserve to be the highest paid player that's a non-quarterback in the league? I think it's absolutely, yeah. You look at it right now, and this is what we know about Nick Bosa. He is the highest, he is the reigning NFL Defensive Player of the Year. Since 2019, he also has the fifth most sacks, despite missing nearly all of 2020. Remember, back in that 2020 season, he got knocked out really early in week 2 against the Jets. So you look at his numbers right now for Nick Bosa, like I said, he's the fifth most sacks. The only players with more sacks than Nick Bosa right now are TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Cameron Jordan, Aaron Donald, Matthew Judon. So I guess that actually makes him sixth. So sixth most, but when you start to look at it, the numbers of games played for Nick Bosa, just 51. He's only played 51 games, 43 sacks in 51 games. It's a little bit better for TJ Watt. He's played 56, and he's at 57.5. Myles Garrett, 54 sacks in 57 games. When it comes to Nick Bosa, I do just think that he is at that point where he deserves to be paid more than Aaron Donald, especially. Aaron Donald, 43.5 sacks and 60 games played. Nick Bosa is better than that. Nick Bosa for the 49ers, and I think also you have to take into account where Nick Bosa is in terms of how important he is to this 49ers defense. Nick Bosa is the straw that stirs the drink, so to say, for the 49ers defense. Without him out there, this isn't a Super Bowl caliber defense. It's a playoff caliber defense, I think, but not a Super Bowl caliber defense. And this season is all about the Super Bowl. And Gregus Khan comes in and he's right there with me. He says, always pay a generational player in his prime. And absolutely. And you go back and you look at Nick Bosa and you look at his numbers throughout his career. Like I mentioned, it was 43.5 sacks. He missed, like I said, almost all of the 2020 season because of that injury. But beyond that, you look at it, 9 sacks his rookie season. He is the Associated Press Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2019. Then in 2021, 15.5 sacks. And there goes the Bosa Express. See, even the train knows what's supposed to happen. It's Bosa's time. 15 and a half sacks in 2021 makes the Pro Bowl. Backs that up in 2022, 18 and a half sacks, and he's the Associated Press Defensive Player of the Year. And that's, fitting of a guy who should be paid the highest non-quarterback number in the NFL. Absolutely. And Coffee Buzz, I agree with you. It's not clickbait. Nick Bosa is worth it. And yeah, is he worth it only if he stays healthy? Of course. And you can say that about every player in every league, whether it's just the 49ers in the NFL, Golden State Warriors and NBA, baseball, Philadelphia Phillies or what have you. It doesn't matter. When you're paying top dollar for players, absolutely it's only worth it if they stay healthy. But Bosa's been healthy since he joined the 49ers, other than the one injury out in New York, which that game, if you remember, took down a lot of the 49ers. But other than that, Nick Bosa has been very healthy. He's played in his career with the Niners. He has started 16 games, all 16 in 2019, all 17 in 2021. Last season, he started 16 games for the 49ers, played in 16. He missed one game. But this is a guy who's been very healthy, been able to make big plays for the 49ers. And he absolutely, positively deserves to make it as the highest non-quarterback in the NFL. I would say the number for Nick Bosa that we're hearing is that he's targeting $35 million. And that makes sense. His agent, when you look at the agent that he works with, the deals that he's gotten, they've all been about an 8 to 10% increase over the previously highest paid player at that position. When you look at Nick Bosa getting that increase over Aaron Donald, it'd help if I could speak, especially on a speaking medium like this. It would be right around 34.5 million. So that's why we keep hearing 35. Kurt Sampson says $35 million doesn't make sense at all. It does when you consider that there's two positions in the NFL that you pay money for. You pay money for quarterbacks, and you pay the money for the guys who get after the quarterback. The most important players on the field, quarterbacks, and the guys that sack the quarterbacks. Plain and simple. Linebackers, defensive backs, all these other spots, you can get away with it. There's not very many quarterbacks that are going to take you to a Super Bowl, just like there's not very many defensive players that are going to take you to a Super Bowl. And I think pass rushers are worth more than defensive backs, because those pass rushers oftentimes are the ones that are getting those defensive backs paid, because their pressure is where those turnovers come from that the DBs are getting paid for. So I do think that he's worth the money. And he says, don't take my comments out of context. Kurt, maybe what's happened is you're responding to somebody else, and then I put it up there. I'm not trying to put that on you. I'm just talking in general in terms of where this topic is going, as far as people believing that Nick Bosa isn't worth being the highest paid non-quarterback, and me making the argument for him. So if I took your comment out of context, I apologize. That wasn't the intent. I just saw it pop up, and it made sense with some of what I've been seeing lately. 49ers Fish and Chips says, congrats, Jack. You are my starting YouTube 49er feed for the 2023 season. Proper journalistic content rather than chasing cash. Pride yourself in beating other so-called journalists easily. Hey, it's just a matter, you put it out there, you do what you can. Everything's going to work out on its own. We'll see where I end up. Hopefully this is a good season. I appreciate you for making me my starting YouTuber for the 2023 season. I appreciate that, Fish and Chips. So that's where I am with regards to Nick Bosa. I do believe that he is worth being the highest paid non-quarterback, $35 million. I think he's worth it, and we'll see where he goes from there. In terms of the salary cap and all these kind of things, the 49ers can make this work in a number of ways. Nick Bosa is still young. As we saw earlier from Greg Gascon, where he said, you pay your generational talent. And that's what the 49ers have done a pretty good job of. And if you look at the way they generally do these deals, these are guys, Nick Bosa right now, he's only going to be turning 26 this season. So you expect to see him for a good 7-8 years in the NFL. You get this deal done and you structure in a way that you can then maybe, as the numbers on the cap start to uptick, then you give him more money because you're able to redo his deal, renegotiate it, give him cash up front, those types of things. That's how the 49ers have usually gotten these deals done, is generally with their big money contracts. There's a period in there where they can restructure, turn some of that salary into signing bonus, which puts the money in the player's pocket quickly and those types of things. I think they can do that here with Nick Bosa. They just got to get the guaranteed money worked out. That's what the sticking point. And you look at it right now, and Mike Silver put out a tweet about the 49ers missing the boat right now, that the 49ers are getting this wrong. And I agree with them. I think the 49ers, this is a deal. Nick Bosa is your most important defensive asset. There is no reason to be playing this back and forth game with him. If he wants 35 million, you give him the 35 million and you will figure out how you're going to make it work. Jed asked me, Jack, do you think they pay Bosa and Ayuk? I think they can, but then it's going to start getting tight with several guys coming up in the next couple of years. I do think they can. It's a matter of taking guys that are further on down the road. You either extend them to lower their cap hits. Guys like Fred Warner he's prime for a restructure. George Kittle, all these guys that are the 49ers big dollar guys. If you expect to have them around for a while, you can go ahead and you can extend them. Trent Williams, for example, is a guy who you can extend if you want to, if you feel like that's the direction you want to take it, or you keep him where he is right now. And if his plan is to retire the year after next, when he retires, you're going to be able to save a bunch of money against the cap there. So there's a lot of flexibility built into this. You look at the number right now and you see that they're over the cap for next year, but that's because they haven't started to make the moves that they need to make. They'll make the moves necessary to get to where they want to go. And it is going to get tight. It already is tight. We're already seeing them be a little top heavy, and that's where with the quarterback situation that they have right now, it's on the lower side. So it allows them to do this with certain positions when it comes to, if they decide that, and it works out the way that they think it's going to work out, and Brock Purdy is the guy that's going to become the franchise quarterback, that's not for 3 or 4 years down the road. They have a long ways to go before Brock Purdy is going to cost them a bunch of money against the cap. He's going to play. He has 3 more years remaining on his contract. You probably get a restructure done around that last season where you give him a new contract, and that new contract is still going to have a couple of early years that are cheap. So I think that it works out really well for them. In terms of Bosa being maxed out coming out of college, I don't think it's all that wrong. There were some questions around Bosa coming out of college. He had dealt with a couple of injuries. So coming out, I can understand why when he was coming out of college, there were some questions around Nick Bosa coming out. He had 2 injuries in 3 seasons, I think it was, with Ohio State. And so I think that's where a lot of those questions come from. And why those kind of comments were made. So, and I don't totally disagree with it. Bosa's come in and he's turned it around. He had the injury in 2020, which we talked about, but now, he's played all of the last 2 years. And I think he's showing that some of those things, sometimes this stuff is fluky, and right now he's in a good position. Andre asked, hey, Jack, do you think it is on Lynch or Parag York the ultimate decision to pay Bosa right now? I think at the end of the day, it comes down to Parag and York in terms of really more York in terms of the guaranteed money that he's willing to pay up. But I think it also falls on Lynch, and it also falls on Shanahan to put pressure on those guys to get the deals done. That's why, when you hear some people talking about the mistake that they made with Trey Lance, I think that could be playing into this a little bit, is that maybe the mistake that Lynch and Shanahan made at the quarterback spot with the draft picks, maybe that's kind of coming back to bite them right now, because York might be saying, hey, I gave you guys carte blanche to go out and find a quarterback. I paid him $27 million to start 4 games. You guys can't be screwing this up. So I'm going to stick with Parag this time. I'm not going to take your advice. And Parag's already been known to have some issues here. Parag is a guy who, in that Trent Williams deal, almost caused Trent Williams to go to the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think it's on York at the end of the day to get it done, but I think he needs to be pressured properly to get there. Got a new member. Wanted to shout out Fish and Chips. He is a new member of the channel. If you're not already a member of the channel, so here we go with Fish and Chips. You get it. That's why you see the $ next to his name. If you want to be a member of the channel, if you want to get it, if you're a member, your comments, your stuff is going to get pulled up quicker. Same thing with super chats as well. Those are the ones that get highlighted. Those are the ones that jump out on the screen. So sometimes I'm going to miss your comments. If you're a member of the channel, it's a super chat. Those get highlighted for me, and that's why they get pulled up all the time. So another member says, this is Luke Walsh, says, Inside the Farmers with Jack Hammer, someone said holdouts have a 60% higher chance of getting injured. I can understand that. I don't know if there's a percentage, but it makes sense that a holdout could have a higher percentage chance of getting injured. That's one of the concerns I think the 49ers have with Nick Bosa. And I think this is why Kyle Shanahan on Friday on his radio interview talked about needing to see Bosa prior to the game in Pittsburgh. I know there's been people who have said, hey, they could sign him on Saturday at 1:00 in the afternoon, and he's going to be playing in the game 24 hours later. I don't think that's the case. Kyle Shanahan himself saying that, he doesn't think that's the case either, that he thinks that he needs to see him on the field and get some work done there. Real quick, I want to pull this one up. It says, appreciate the answer, Jack. We really appreciate you here in Brazil. Hey, I appreciate you. And I got to say this really quick. When I was out in Vegas for practice, I was taking the Uber back from practice, and my Uber driver was from Brazil, and he was telling me all about his experience and why he was a 49er fan. He was explaining to me why. And I thought it was so cool. He was telling me that back in the 90s, there wasn't very much NFL football in Brazil. They play like one game a week or every so often. And he became a 49ers fan because he caught the 49ers and the Buffalo Bills on a Monday night, on a nighttime game. I don't know if it was Sunday or Monday night. And he said that to me, and I was driving the car. I said, well, that must have been around like 1990, 1992, right? He said, absolutely. Because that game that he was, if you're an old-time 49er fan and you remember seeing the play, it was I think it was actually 95, 96. I think the game that he was referring to was either the game where Steve Young and Jim Kelly just went back and forth. It was a Sunday afternoon game. They put up a ton of points, or it was the Sunday night game where Gary Plummer meets the running back at the goal line, and the other linebacker, Lee Woodall, picked it up and sprinted the other direction for a touchdown. Anyway, you got me off on a tangent, Professor Andre, but it's awesome to see it. We do have an international contingent here. We also have folks from Austria, from the UK, all over the globe that like to watch the channel. So it's awesome, man. I wanted to make sure I shouted that out and just give you a little bit of backstory on something that happened for me recently. So, and he says, for sure, the 49ers have the second or third biggest fan base here in Brazil. Patriots are the first. Hey, the Patriots make sense because they've been in so many Super Bowls. So it would make sense that that they have a lot of following internationally. Fish and Chips says the same thing. It was the night game. I watched it here in the UK at the time. So there you go. There you go. And then we got to Aaron Weston from Thailand. Hey, we are taking the Inside the 49ers with Jack Hammer show is an international brand. There you go. We are international. We are making it. Hey, if Jack Hammer can be a household name in Brazil, that's awesome. I go to Brazil sometime. I'd love to do that. Close. Shmuel says he lives in Chinatown in San Francisco. Does that count as China? Hey, at least you're close, right? The Asian culture alive and well in downtown San Francisco for sure. So that's the Nick Bosa piece. I think that he's definitely worth it. You start to look at it, and he's just too valuable. This is a 49ers team that is not a Super Bowl team without Nick Bosa. I think that's very clear. I have another one that I wanted to touch on, and this is more of a like a surprise type of player. And it was from actual Dan Lavoie, who said, what about the 49ers season are people probably not expecting, but feels likely? And for me, I think this is going to be it. Something that the 49ers people aren't expecting, but feels likely is that nobody's actually going to be talking about the play of Colton McKivitz once the regular season starts. Offensive linemen are like defensive backs. You don't talk about them unless they screw up. And, you have Colton McKivitz. He's going to start the season with the spotlight on him because he's the guy that's replacing Mike McGlinchey. the 49ers, a lot of fans wanted the 49ers to go out and spend a draft pick, bring in a free agent, all those types of things. Instead, they said, you know what? We like this guy. He fits our budget. This is the direction we're going to go. He's been here for 3 years. And you look at where Colton McKivitz is right now, and I think he's in a good spot. I think, watching Colton McKivitz, he's going to struggle at times, right? Every offensive lineman has their bad moments. They're going to get beat. Even Trent Williams gets beat for sacks every once in a while, and he'll get beat bad. You do see bad film on every offensive lineman. I think, though, that when it comes to McKivitz, you look at what he's done in training camp and in the preseason, and from what I've noticed and what everybody else has been saying is that he's looked really solid, especially with his footwork and his hand placement. Those are two of the biggest things when it comes to offensive linemen, especially in pass protection, is having their feet right, where they're not lunging, and they're able to get out to where they can be square, and they're not having to lean, those types of things. He's been really good with his feet, getting there, showing good footwork. And he's been doing really well with his hands, not getting them out here outside of his body. He's been able to shoot his hands, been in good position. So I really think that when you look at Colton McKivitz and you go through this season, there's a lot of people talking about him and worried about the way that he's going to play. But I think that you look at the beginning of the season in particular, right? You get Pittsburgh. There's some tough games for the 49ers that are on their early schedule when it comes to pass rushers. We know that, in Pittsburgh, you're going to see TJ Watt. That's one of the guys that we were just talking about. You're going to see the 49ers having to go up against TJ Watt, and then the Dallas Cowboys and the pass rushers that they have in Dallas. The New York Giants are kind of a little bit of a sleeper team as well. You look at Myles Garrett, another one that the 49ers are going to have to face this year out in Cleveland a little bit later on in the season. Hassan Reddick of the Philadelphia Eagles, and we know all about what Reddick was able to do last year. He's the one that ended the 49ers season with his ability to get to the quarterback and get to Brock Purdy, right, and the injury and everything that took place there. So it's a tough schedule early on, and really kind of a tough schedule all the way throughout. So Micah Parsons, with the Cowboys that they're going to have to face, and you just look at the group that they have to go against, and they're going to be in tough when it comes to pass rushers that they're facing. And Colton McKivitz is going to have the spotlight on him, especially early on. And I just have a feeling that we're not going to be talking about him, that we're going to see that it's not going to be so much about him. The 49ers, if they get off to a fast start, if their quarterback play is where it was last season and the ball's coming out quickly, and he's able to move at times when he has to and make plays with his legs and those types of things, I don't think we're going to be talking about Colton McKivitz. I actually have more concern with the 49ers' ability to run the ball up the middle and get push with the interior of that offensive line than I have when it comes to Colton McKivitz and his pass protection. So when it comes to that, that's my take on it. I think the 49ers that's the bigger concern for San Francisco. They have yet in the two games. Well, shouldn't say this totally, because against the Raiders, we saw them struggle with that run up the middle. Last week in the game against the Chargers, they were getting a really good push, but a lot of that too was they weren't going against the starters of the Chargers. They were going against the twos mostly. So I don't know on that one. I don't feel that we're going to see much of him. The next topic, let's just kind of transition over to, this was a really good one from Dan Case. He says, how many 49ers will be in the 1,000 yard club? And he says, Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle. Can we get all four? And my answer to Dan would be no. I don't think it's likely that all four of those guys make it into the 1,000 yard club, especially that the receivers, especially with Ayuk, Samuel, and Kittle. There's no way that all three of those guys make it into the 1,000 yard club. You look at the 49ers history, the 49ers have not had two players go over 1,000 yards since 1998. The last time two wide receivers of the 49ers went over 1,000 yards was 98. Jerry Rice with 1,157. Terrell Owens, 1,097. So I just don't see this happening. I do think that you look at this and you can say, okay, Christian McCaffrey, he's going to get there on the ground. He can be 1,000 yard guy on the ground. I don't see him being 1,000 guy. but 1,000 yards on the ground sounds possible. I think he's probably going to be somewhere in the 800s in terms of receiving yards. And then you look at the pass catchers, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. I think one of those is going to get to 1,000, but I don't think you're going to see two of them. I think, you look at the numbers for Kittle. His numbers with Brock Purdy were really good, but that was more about what they were doing down in the red zone and the touchdowns that they were generating. It wasn't a high volume of yards for Kittle, and I don't think with having the ball between McCaffrey and Ayuk and Samuel, you got Kittle, you've got all these playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. I just don't see them having more than two of those guys. Like I said, McCaffrey, I think if McCaffrey does not get over 1,000 yards, it's because he didn't play the full season. If he doesn't rush for over 1,000 yards, he's a 1,000-yard rusher for sure, I think. And then I think that you're going to see Ayuk or Samuel be that 1,000-yard receiver. And outside chance it's George Kittle. And when it comes on the Kittle piece, that's an interesting one, because when you look at Kittle, I think the biggest thing that's kept Kittle's numbers down isn't because he's not a good player. It's because he hasn't been targeted by the quarterbacks. Jeff Garcia had a interview with a radio station up in Sacramento about 3 months ago now. And I wrote an article about it for the Press Democrat, 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. I took that interview and transcribed it and put it out there, because he said a lot of positive things about Brock Purdy. And he also talked about Brock Purdy and George Kittle and that relationship. And basically what Jeff Garcia said was, you got George Kittle out there. He's one of the best playmakers that you have on your team. You've got to force feed him the ball. You've got to give him opportunities to make plays. And that wasn't happening until Brock Purdy took over. And to an extent, he's right. And to an extent, he's wrong. The targets did go up slightly, but it wasn't major. And I think the biggest thing was that the targets in the red zone elevated. So when it comes to that, I do think you'll see McCaffrey as a 1,000-yard rusher, one guy as a 1,000-yard receiver. I just don't see two. Kurt wants to know, how's that level head feel? It feels good. It's one of those things where, hey, don't get too high, don't get too low. I'm a guy who has I can get emotional with the best of them, but when it comes to my reporting, and by the time I usually sit down to write about a game or get on here to talk to you about the game, I've been able to digest it to the point where I think I can process everything and really give you a strong view of what I think is taking place and what's going to take place. So hopefully you like it. I appreciate that comment. That's a good one. I really appreciate that. That means a lot. Now let's get to, I just got a couple more I wanted to hit real quick. Andrew, he's over in the comments, and his question was, the stable of running backs is deep this year. How do you see the carries being distributed amongst the backs and Deebo Samuel? And this is it's a good question. A lot of people have been talking about that, right? And when you look at the running game and you look at the backs, I think it's pretty simple, right? We know who RB1 is for the 49ers. It's Christian McCaffrey, without a doubt. So McCaffrey is going to be number one when it comes to carries. You look at the 49ers last season and you kind of look through their totals. They're right around 30 carries a game, right in that ballpark. I think there was just under 29 over the season last year in terms of carries per game for the 49ers. So if we were going to look at it and look at a run distribution, McCaffrey is number one. He's going to be somewhere in that 14 to 15 range. So for this exercise, let's just say you're going to see McCaffrey get 15 carries. From there, I think the pecking order goes Elijah Mitchell, then Deebo Samuel, and then you see Jordan Mason as the third running back that's up and active on game days. And then I wouldn't expect to see much of Ty Davis unless there's an injury to one of the running backs ahead of him. Just because, as Kyle Shanahan pointed out last year, Ty Davis-Price doesn't play special teams. Jordan Mason does. And I think you'll see it be McCaffrey, Mitchell, Samuel. Those are the top three in terms of carries. Jordan Mason will be running back RB3. And so he'll pick up a few carries here and there. So, using 30 as the number, 15 for McCaffrey sounds about right, with about 10 for Mitchell. And then the other 4 or 5 are going to be split between Mason and Samuel. Samuel's role really, I think, is dependent upon what they're seeing from the defense as far as how often they're going to try to get him into the game. They like to really use him out of the backfield. They like to utilize him as a receiver runner, in the fly sweep type of game, he does a really good job with that. So I just look at it. I think that's the way the numbers are going to break down. Gregus Khan asks a good question. How long you think Mitchell lasts? Won't be long before TDP gets an opportunity. I think it's different now. I think that, we know the injury history for Mitchell is a problem, but having Christian McCaffrey be the guy that carries the load, I think could help Elijah Mitchell finally stay healthy. He hasn't had the ability to be really since day one that he came to the 49ers. He has been the starting running back. If you go back to 2021, you'll remember he was supposed to be the second running back behind Raheem Mostert, but then Mostert goes down after just 2 carries. So now Mitchell's the guy, right? Last year they went into the season with him being the guy. He wasn't. Greg says it didn't help him last year, but it did. When you go back and you look at where he he wasn't injured. If I go back and I'm trying to remember really quick. Let me look at the numbers again, but I don't think he was injured after the 49ers picked up Christian McCaffrey, because he went into the season last year as the number 1 back, right? Came out, he was the number 1 guy, and that's where the injury occurred. And just like in the year before, he was the number 1 back. So you go into last year's history, right? And you're right a little bit. Yeah, he had the injury to start the season, right? The knee injury. And I think that knee injury, so he was out for 7 weeks, 7 games, comes back, gets 18 carries in his first game back, 9 and 7 the next 2, and then he's out again. And I think the reason that he was out, without looking it up, had to do with something to do with that knee, I think, was bugging him throughout the year. So if he can keep the knee, if he can come in now, I think he's healthy. If he can get out there, I think that he'll, as a secondary guy that's coming in to take 9-10 carries a game, I think he can do it. If he doesn't, like you're saying, you'll have Ty Davis Price get an opportunity. You don't really want to see that. I think you want to see him on the bench. Quite honestly, I think you want to see Jordan Mason be getting most of the carries. So, when you look at how this works out, Ty Davis Price would be elevated. He'd be working on a couple of carries at the end of games type of thing. Whereas then it would be McCaffrey and Mason and Debo being the main guys. So hopefully he'll stay healthy. It's that Greg says, it seemed to me that he came off injury and lasted a couple of quarters, maybe. No, he came off the injury. Just again, he was injured in week 1. Then he doesn't play until week 9. In week 9, 18 carries in that game, 89 yards. Week 10 against the Cardinals, 9 carries, 59 yards. And then he had 7 carries for 35 yards against New Orleans. And I think he got banged up in that New Orleans game again. And then we didn't see him for a while. Then he came back in the final game against Arizona, 5 carries for 55. Didn't play very well against Seattle, 9 carries for just 2 yards. And then 14 for 51 against Dallas in the divisional round. And he was inactive for the final game. So it's definitely been an up and down deal with him. And so we'll see what happens with Elijah Mitchell. Got to see him stay healthy, because he's a really good back. If he can just stay healthy, he'd be a really nice player. But that's part of the problem with running backs in San Francisco. They tend to wear down. Around the NFL, that's something that happens across the league as well. So. The next one, in terms of the topics, going along, this will be the last one. Who do you, Zach Damon says, Zach U. Demand, I think is what it's supposed to be on Twitter, says, who do you expect to be listed as a healthy scratch week 1? So let's get into it. Week 1, 49ers at Pittsburgh. Who do you expect to be a healthy scratch for week 1? I think this one is, my projection is going to be Ty Davis Price and Nick Bosa, Brandon Allen. Remember, the quarterback, even though he doesn't count against the 48-man limit, he can still play in that game. He doesn't have to be on the active roster. So I think you would see Brandon Allen as an inactive player pretty much all season. I think Braden Willis is inactive. Ray McLeod, the wide receiver, they're hoping that he comes back, but I think he'll be inactive. I'm going to go with Jalen Graham. One of those rookie linebackers isn't going to be active. I'm going to go with Jalen Graham. I don't know why. Just that's the name I'm picking there. And then I think along the defensive line, Kalia Davis doesn't. So you know, right now that's right. The 49ers have a 53-man squad. When it comes to game days, you can have 48 men up. So that means that there's 2 more that the 49ers need to bring up from their practice squad to get up to that 48-man limit. For me, I think that McLeod, because of the injury, he gets replaced by Willie Snead. Snead, a nice receiver that has special teams ability, so that's why Snead gets the call up. And then as far as Kalia Davis not being one of those guys that's going to be up on Sunday of next week against Pittsburgh, I think he gets replaced by either Kerry Hyder Jr. or Austin Bryant, another defensive lineman. Kerry Hyder makes a lot of sense because he can play inside and outside, whereas Bryant is more of just a pass rusher. So that's how I'm seeing it. I was also asked another question really quick was, you know, if the 49ers lose to Pittsburgh coming up on Sunday, if the 49ers lose week 1 in Pittsburgh, why do they lose? And I think it's comes down to this. The 49ers will lose to the Steelers on Sunday if they can't stop the run. And, you know, I understand, you know, we can point to turnovers. Obviously, if they turn the ball over more than their opponents, they're going to lose. Their history shows that. But I think beyond turnovers, if the 49ers allow Pittsburgh to control the line of scrimmage and the ball on offense, that plays into the Steelers' hands. Because here's one of the things that I've noticed with Kyle Shanahan. He gets impatient when he feels like he's losing possessions. And when the opponent is able to go out and control the ball and control the time, that takes away possessions from the 49ers. And that's generally when you see him being a little over aggressive with the way that he's calling the game. And it just seems like when they're in that type of a situation, that's usually when we see them start to struggle. Last year, you had a couple of examples of it. Denver was one of those. Another example of it was Atlanta. So 2 losses early in the season where the 49ers struggled to get off the field, struggled to stop the run. And as a result, their offense struggled to get going and get any kind of a rhythm of its own because that defense was on the field so much. So if the 49ers are going to lose next week in Pittsburgh, I think that's why. We'll talk about the game a lot more throughout this week and getting ahead to Sunday. But, you know, that's where we are as far as, again, Nick Bosa, not worth being the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. Prove me wrong. Explain to me, make me believe it. Again, I'll just hit on that one last time. Nick Bosa is worth being the highest paid non-quarterback because he gets after the quarterback. He is one of the best, most important players on the 49ers defense. Quarterbacks, defensive ends. Those are the guys that should be paid the most money in the NFL. We're seeing that across the league already. Quarterback position, we're seeing that starting to happen with defensive ends. Nick Bosa deserves $35 million a year. That's where his target, I think, is. And until the 49ers get there, it's not going to happen. So, hey, take it for what it's worth. I want to say thanks to everybody for taking the time to tune in. If you guys can do me a favor, hit that like button. Somebody mentioned that earlier, to slam that like button. So hit that like button if you could, please. And then in terms of after you hit that like button, also subscribe to the channel. If you're watching this and you haven't already become a subscriber of Inside the 49ers with Jack Hammer, hit that subscribe button. And then last but not least, turn on your notifications. That way you don't miss any of the updates right here on Inside the 49ers. Going to bring you all the breaking news. If something happens with Nick Bosa, we will come on. We will get that information to you right away. So thanks a lot. Thank you, Gregus. Appreciate you for coming on, especially now that I know who you are. That's even better. Fish and Chips says, woohoo, hit that like button. Please do that. Fish and Chips, also a member of the channel. Kurt Sampson, like and subscribe. Kurt, thank you for that. So please, again, thank you all so much. Like, subscribe, turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything right here on Inside the 49ers with Jack Hammer.